So what do we know about the beginning? From most of us, we look at the Bible, and we go to Genesis, and we see that God breathed life into Adam, right? And then out of a rib, he made a woman. Now, this is all metaphorical. Remember who was writing this? A bunch of guys, you know. Now, I'm not saying that they weren't divinely inspired, but let's put it this way. Even divinely inspired, it goes through your own filter. And it goes through the filter of the time. So you have these two wonderful people walking around Eden, right? And God who loves them because he made them in his image. They're walking around Eden. He says, oh, you got only one thing I don't want you to do. Just don't eat of that tree of the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. Well, anybody who's raised a kid, the moment you say, do not do that one thing, that's all, just don't, what do? They go do it. Well, how dumb, except, again, this is coming through the thought of man. He's got to explain how this world came about. So we had to do something wrong. Man had to do something wrong. And so in that moment that they ate of the tree, of the fruit, of the knowledge of good and evil, right? They began to recognize, as kind of what the Course would say, is duality. That there could be an opposite to what is all-encompassing. That there could be an opposite to love. And in that thought, the entire physical world basically came out of that. Now, why? Because the moment that they did that, they didn't feel good about themselves, did they? What does it say? They felt shame. They knew they were naked. All of a sudden, all this guilt stuff came about. And the world is a projection of all this guilt stuff that comes about. Okay, so now you've got Adam and Eve feeling guilty. Now, the beauty of Eden could still be, I mean, the idea is we want to blame somebody, so we blame God for casting them out, but who really cast them out? In their own minds, the moment that they did this, they cast themselves out of Eden, did they not? Because they felt guilt. They felt shame. In that moment, they were no longer joined with God. They were cast out in their own minds. God didn't have to do a darn thing. Just like when you tell a child not to do something and they do it, the first thing they look so sheepish. A lot of times kids punish themselves way more than you punish them, right? By their own guilt. Why would that not be the same for Adam and Eve? But we have to blame God. He did this. He kicked us out of everything that was loving and everything that was beautiful because we did one thing wrong. And I always go back to this. What parent or what responsible adult would ever say, I'm going to give a kid only one chance? How many chances have you given kids? Well, tons of chances. So the fact that God would only give you one, you make one mistake and you're out. You know, you get 3 in baseball. 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out. God gives you 1 and you're out. Come on, it doesn't make any sense. But what makes sense to us is that that's how we can, or the people at that time, those who are the authors of the Bible, could understand it. Had to explain it somehow. Okay, that's the Old Testament. Then we get the New Testament where Jesus comes and he brings us this new covenant. And in that covenant, he talks about God being a God of love. Well, who wants a God of love who's going to give you one chance and kick you out of paradise? Right? So we still have this image we have, but he's coming here saying, no, this is not what you think. And still, even with that, man comes along and can distort things, because you have the Paul of the Bible, you know, who never knew Jesus, and he became the legalistic side of the Bible. So we have all these laws and regulations. But what you always have to go back to is the heart. And the heart is what Jesus brought. And even in the Old Testament, the heart is what created Eden, is what created, loved man, or loved the Son of God, if you will, the image. So I think we have to always go back to the essence in both of the books of the Bible, whether it be the Old Testament and the New Testament, and recognize that it's about love. And and the actions that we have attributed to God are more the actions we use to blame God for the place we find ourselves in, what we did to ourselves. So now with that perspective, look back at this. So it says, pain proclaims God cruel. We're back on that first paragraph, that 5th line. Then the 6th line says, how could it be real in any form? It witnesses to God the Father's hatred of his Son, the sinfulness he sees in him, and his insane desire for revenge and death. Well, wait a minute. Let's go back to what we said. We pinned that one on God. But who felt the moment that they ate, if we go back to that truth, or that thought, ate of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, what'd they feel? Shame. So it wasn't God who projected that shame onto them, it's us. And do we not do that even now? We think a thought, and we go, oh, I'm so bad, I shouldn't be thinking that. You know, we say something, and we go, oh, that's a mean thing to say, how awful of me. Or we look out on others and say, how could they do that? We put ourselves, we eat of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil every day and feel our shame. Because we do not believe there is only love. We believe that there can be an opposite to it, that there can be something else, that there is not just joy, there is pain and there is suffering. So it goes on to say, because of how we've imaged God. So the second paragraph, can such projections be attested to? Can they be anything but wholly false? If God is a God of love, that he would make an Eden for his children, if we come when Jesus, who came to give us a new covenant, because evidently we screwed it up in the first one, why would he not come now with A Course in Miracles and say, yet again, let's try one more time? You know, let's look at the things that you have made and stop dwelling in your pain and choose the joy of God as what you truly want. Can there be anything, can these images be anything but wholly false? So it says, pain is but witness to the son's mistake in what he thinks he is. That's probably the biggest line in there. Pain is this outward witness to the son's, the Christ child, the truth within us, our mistake in what we think we are. What is this course entirely about? Trying to find out who we are, trying to remember that we are as God created us, trying to remember this truth that abides within us that we have never lost. Even in Eden, Adam and Eve had that truth and that reality when they thought there could be an opposite to love, which is like eating of that fruit. They thought then they could feel guilt, they could feel shame. But it was only in that mistaken moment that became the entire, as the Course would say, physical world. We made an opposite to love, and it became this experience. In one thought, in one action, it occurred. So what it's telling us is that even though it appears like there's many, many actions out there to prove the opposite of love, as we change one thought, we can change the world. That's why when you review these lessons, it says one of these lessons could do it for you. Because within them is this entire thought system.